It was supposed to be the company's proudest day. After months of sleepless nights, software testing, and millions of dollars invested, Latent Dynamics, one of the biggest tech corporations in America, was ready to unveil its groundbreaking AI system, one that could redefine cybersecurity for the entire banking world. The CEO, Robert Layton, stood tall before the glass walls of the company's high-rise in downtown Manhattan. Cameras were set up. Reporters waited outside. Within minutes, global investors from Tokyo to London would join the live stream to witness history. But then, everything went dark. Monitors flickered. Servers froze. Lines of code vanished in a blink. A chilling silence filled the control room before panic erupted. The multi-million-dollar system had crashed completely. Sweat trickled down Robert's temple. Months of work, gone. Billions at stake. His entire reputation, his legacy, was dissolving before his eyes. Engineers shouted commands. Analysts scrambled. Tech leads typed furiously. Nothing worked. No backups, no recovery. The core had been corrupted. Someone muttered that the system couldn't be rebooted without rewriting the kernel. An impossible task under such pressure. And in that storm of chaos, no one noticed the quiet made cleaning the corner of the room that morning. Mariah Daniels, a middle-aged black woman who had worked in the building for years, silently wiped the CEO's desk as the storm unfolded. Her teenage son, Caleb, waited downstairs, killing time after school while his mother finished her morning shift. When the CEO finally shouted in despair that the company was ruined, Mariah glanced at the frozen screens and whispered something to herself, words that would soon rewrite every prejudice in that building. Because in less than an hour, when all hope was gone, the son of the cleaning lady would walk into that boardroom and do what the world's best engineers couldn't. Robert Layton was the definition of success. A self-made billionaire with an iron will, he built his company from a dorm room startup into one of the most powerful names in cybersecurity. But with his achievements came a darker pride, an unspoken belief that brilliance only came from certain places, certain schools, certain people. He prided himself on hiring the best of the best, graduates from Ivy League universities, experts with spotless resumes, fluent in jargon and data models. His company looked like a vision of modern excellence, yet it was eerily uniform. Diversity, in his eyes, was a PR checkbox, not a real commitment. In that environment, Mariah Daniels was invisible. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise to clean the executive floors, polishing the glass conference tables, wiping down keyboards, emptying bins. She moved silently, humming gospel tunes, careful never to disturb the early arriving staff. Most never learned her name. Some nodded politely. Others looked right through her. But Mariah carried her own quiet pride. She had raised her son, Caleb, on her own after her husband passed away when Caleb was just 8. She worked double shifts, sometimes sleeping only a few hours a night, just to keep a roof over their heads and send her boy to school. Caleb, now 17, was everything she dreamed he'd become. Curious, kind, and brilliant. He spent his free time reading coding manuals from the library and experimenting on an old, second-hand laptop he'd repaired himself. He could lose hours building small programs, debugging systems, and tinker with open-source security tools. He dreamed of working in tech someday, but reality reminded him that dreams like his were often laughed off. His mother had once asked a Latent Dynamics HR manager if the company offered internships for students from local schools. The woman smiled politely and said they were looking for more experienced candidates. So, Caleb continued to learn on his own, teaching himself Python, C++, and encryption techniques from online forums, while his mother cleaned offices filled with people who had no idea genius was waiting for her downstairs every day. That morning, Mariah had promised Caleb she'd be done early so they could have lunch together. But when she reached the CEO's floor, something felt different. The tension in the air was electric. People were running, shouting, cursing under their breath. She heard the CEO's voice echo from the glass-walled boardroom, panicked and angry. She froze for a moment outside the door, hearing fragments of chaos. System failure. The colonel's dead. Everything's gone. Her heart sank. She didn't understand the tech jargon, but she understood crisis. And when she peeked in, she saw the man everyone called Mr. Layton looking broken in a way that made him almost human. For a fleeting second, Mariah wanted help, though she didn't know how. She thought her son downstairs, always talking about systems kernels, encryption layers, words she never fully grasped. She whispered softly, "Lord, maybe he could fix something like this." She finished cleaning quietly, unnoticed amid the storm. But fate was already aligning, because a few minutes later, while she waited for the elevator, Robert Layton himself walked past her, pale and shaking. "We're done," he muttered to his assistant. "The launch is dead. Everything we built is gone." And just then, the elevator doors opened, and Mariah's son, Caleb, looked up from his phone and saw the CEO for the first time. The day spiraled faster than anyone could have imagined. Within an hour, the company's stock price began to slip as rumors leaked. The servers were down across every branch. Investors were demanding answers, and the system, the core software, refused to reboot. Robert's top engineers had gathered in the operations lab, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Some whispered about sabotage. Others suspected a data corruption bug. Either way, the fix would take days, if not weeks. And in the world of live tech launches, a few hours could mean total ruin. Mariah waited near the lobby, unsure whether to stay or leave. She texted Caleb to meet her near the elevator, but when he arrived, he noticed something in her eyes. Worry. "They're having some big computer problem," she told him softly. "Everyone's panicking." Caleb's curiosity sparked instantly. He glanced up at the giant digital display in the lobby, which still read, "Layton Dynamics, system launch 10 a.m. It was already 10:47. The screen flickered, distorted, and froze. He frowned, recognizing the type of glitch. It wasn't a power issue. It was structural, a failure at the core. He hesitated before asking, "Do they have a recovery console?" Mariah chuckled nervously. "Baby, I don't even know what that means." Before she could say more, a man in a suit came rushing past, cursing under his breath about the corrupted kernel file and dead architecture. Caleb's eyes widened. He understood every word. He had studied similar issues in online forums where developers discussed debugging OS-level errors. And just like that, instinct took over. He looked at his mom, hesitated, then said quietly, "I think I can help." Mariah froze. "Caleb, no. These are rich people's problems." But her son's mind was already racing. He couldn't stand there while people suffered over something he might be able to fix. Moments later, while executives debated shutting everything down, Caleb slipped into the open operations room. No one noticed him at first. Just a skinny teenager in thrifted clothes, clutching a small backpack. The giant monitors filled the room with red alerts and error codes. He stepped closer. The engineers were too busy arguing to notice when he scanned the screens. He saw the problem immediately, an infinite loop caused by a recursive line of code within the AI security layer. Whoever had built it used an outdated patch, incompatible with the company's new architecture. A classic kernel corruption. Caleb's hands itched to fix it. Before he could think, he quietly opened his backpack, pulled out a USB drive, and inserted it into an unused terminal. He ran his diagnostic script, a tool he'd built himself for debugging open-source AI systems. Within seconds, he saw confirmation. The system could be repaired, but it required manually patching the loop and rewriting a missing security certificate. He knew it could work. He'd done similar fixes in his coding experiments before, never on this scale, but the logic was the same. A senior engineer finally noticed him and snapped, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Caleb stepped back nervously, but before he could speak, Robert Layton stormed in. His eyes swept the room, then landed on the teenager. "Who's this?" he demanded. No one had an answer. Mariah, hearing the commotion, rushed in behind him. "Sir, I'm sorry, that's my son. He was just waiting for me." Robert's face hardened. "This is a restricted area. Get him out of here." Caleb lowered his eyes, but before leaving, he blurted out, "I think I know what's wrong with your system." The room went silent. For a moment, Robert almost laughed. But then he saw something in the boy's eyes. Confidence. Not arrogance, but quiet certainty. Against his better judgment, he said, "Fine. You've got 2 minutes." Tell me what you think." Caleb swallowed hard and began explaining, using simple terms but precise logic. He described how a recursive security loop had corrupted the kernel, and how patching the missing certificate would reboot the AI's command structure without wiping the database. The room went still. The engineers exchanged stunned looks. Everything the boy said made sense. Robert stared at him, torn between disbelief and desperation. Finally, he said, "Show me." And that's when history began to change. Every second felt like a lifetime. Caleb sat at the control station, surrounded by some of the most advanced engineers in the country. People twice his age and with resumes longer than his entire life. His fingers trembled at first, but then something inside him steadied. He began typing. Lines of code filled the screen like flowing poetry. He navigated directories, opened the system kernel, and patched a recursive loop. He rewrote the damaged encryption certificate using a custom script he had written for fun months ago. For nearly 10 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft tapping of his fingers and the hum of machines. Then he hit enter. The screens went black. For one horrifying moment, it seemed like everything had died again. Robert's heart sank until the central monitor flickered back to life. Green. System rebooting. Then, kernel restored. Security layer integrity, 100%. System online. Cheers erupted. Engineers shouted. Someone actually clapped. The CEO stood frozen, disbelief etched into every line of his face. The impossible had happened. The system was back online. Robert turned toward the boy, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. How did you?" he began, but the words failed him. Caleb simply shrugged and said, "It's just code. You just had to look at it differently." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For years, the company had prided itself on exclusivity, on perfection, on looking for the right kind of people. Yet it was a janitor's son, the kid no one even noticed, who saved the company from total collapse. News of the miracle fix spread within minutes. Reporters who had been preparing to report disaster suddenly switched to covering the miraculous comeback. Investors cheered. The company's stock rebounded. And in the center of it all, a quiet young man stood next to his mother, who couldn't stop crying. Robert finally approached Mariah and Caleb. For the first time, his tone was soft, almost reverent. He asked Caleb where he learned to code. Caleb smiled faintly and said, "Mostly online. My mom couldn't afford classes, so I learned from YouTube and forums." Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he said something no one expected. "How would you like to join our team?" The following weeks transformed everything. Caleb's story spread like wildfire across the company and beyond. News outlets picked it up. Teenager saves billion-dollar launch. CEO humbled by janitor's son. Hidden genius from Harlem fixes corporate crisis. But behind the headlines was something more profound, a quiet reckoning within latent dynamics itself. Robert Layton, a man once defined by his elitism, began to see the blind spots in his empire. He launched a new initiative to find and support underrepresented youth in technology. Internships were open for students from all backgrounds. Scholarships were funded in Caleb's name. And as for Mariah, she never cleaned another desk again. Robert offered her a full salary to manage the new outreach program. "You've already raised one genius," he said. "Let's find a few more." Caleb started working part-time with the engineering team, balancing his high school studies with real-world projects. His code eventually became part of the company's flagship software, earning him both respect and recognition. But what moved people most wasn't his talent. It was his humility. He never bragged, never acted superior. When reporters asked what motivated him, he simply said, "My mom. She believed in me when no one else did." Months later, during a major tech conference, Robert Layton took the stage to announce the relaunch of the AI system. This time, it wasn't just about technology. It was about humanity. Behind him stood his team, diverse and proud, and among them, Caleb and Mariah. Robert began his speech with an admission. "I used to believe brilliance came with a title, a degree, or a pedigree. But on the day we lost everything, a boy who had none of those things reminded me that genius has no color, no class, no privilege. It can come from anywhere, if only we're humble enough to see it." The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But amid all the glory, Caleb simply reached for his mother's hand. She smiled, eyes glistening with pride, whispering, "Told you, baby, God don't make mistakes." In the end, Latent Dynamics became a symbol not just of innovation, but of redemption. The company that once ignored potential in plain sight now became a champion for those who'd been overlooked. And it all started with a single moment, when a forgotten boy looked at a broken system and decided to fix it. Because sometimes the real system that needs repairing isn't digital. It's the one inside people's hearts.